Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, and with me are my esteemed colleagues, the King of Bros, Derek Brown, and Easy E, Andrew Erickson. We're going to break down the Combine for you. That's right, all 472 hours have been watched by the three of us, and now we're going to talk about the winners and losers at every position so that you are armed with the best information as you continue to look ahead to rookie drafts in dynasty leagues or even in redrafts, because we all know those rookies are making a bigger impact more than ever. But before we get going here, I want to remind everybody, we've got a fantastic giveaway promo. Right now, we got our Cam Akers helmet giveaway, thanks to our friends at PristineAuction.com. You can go ahead and win that at FantasyPros.com/contest. Go get that right away. And our winner of the last giveaway was Clint from Arizona. Congratulations, Clint. You won a Stephon Diggs autographed helmet. So that Cam Akers one is up for grabs for the next month here in the month of March. All you have to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel at fantasypros.com/YouTube and youtube.com/fantasypros. This is what happens when you have like a week off where you're having fun with everybody in Arizona and you have to get back into things. So again, go subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube, click that notifications bell, and go head over to fantasypros.com/contest to win that Cam Akers helmet. And don't forget to, with all the boys joining us here, we got Andrew Erickson here now. We've got Derek Brown. We got Matthew Friedman. We got lots of people you can ask questions to over on Discord. They all joined today, so they are free reign for you, but you got to go over and join the chat over at fantasypros.com/chat. And remember, there's lots of free channels, but if you are a premium subscriber to Fantasy Pros, you can upgrade to that premium product and get involved in the stages and the AMAs and dozens of extra channels that are all available for you. And gentlemen, I know this was a fun week of bonding, of fun, of football for all of us. We got to hang out in Arizona, and shout out to our Fantasy Pros team, the people who put that trip together. Utterly amazing amount of work done by an incredible group of people. And I just want, on behalf on everybody on the company, say thank you to them publicly here on the podcast. We also showed ourselves, I think, pretty well. Andrew Erickson in the football game that we played in the little tournament of flag football had a couple of touchdowns. He might have had a pick. I saw Derek Brown slinging the ball around, playing quarterback, wearing ankle weights. I think he was trying to get some extra reps in. But boys, it's nice to be back here. Even though I do kind of miss vacation. Derek, do you miss it already?
Look, I'm still, the soreness is still slightly there to remind me that we were not that far away from Arizona and me tossing dimes over everybody in flag football. Although, yes, Joe, you're right. Like, I look like Carson Strong out there with my lack of mobility and my double ankle braces, but it was fun, man. I mean, good times with the team, a lot of bonding, a lot of laughs, some drinks in between, man. So good times, and I think we're going to build off all that walking into combine season, draft season with the camaraderie that we got with the team. And I'm going to echo some of your thoughts, man. Shout out to everybody behind the scenes as well as forward facing at Fantasy Pros, because it was fantastic. Awesome trip.
Yeah, and Derek has some company at his house today, too. He's multitasking, taking care of not only the young football players here in terms of analysis, but also the young children at the house, because this is what we do. We multitask. We're dads here. Erickson doesn't have any kids, but he does have a championship now to his name. He was part of the East team, which I was a part of as well, and came away from the tournament of flag football champions with the crown. Andrew, what does it feel like to be on top of the world right now as a champion?
Not going to lie, my hips still hurt from all of the maneuvers that I was making up on the football field. My toe is still black and blue, which is interesting. The cleats betrayed me, of course. Too tight, some turf toe, but tape it up, rub some dirt in it, and here I am, ready to go.
Yes, that's what we do. We play through injuries on the East Coast team. That's what we do. And we show up at game time. That's exactly what happens there. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the winners and losers from the Combine. And again, game film always matters. The Combine matters too, but the Combine is basically an opportunity here for players who, really can jump their stock just a little bit. And I want to start here, obviously, at the top of the board with some of the quarterback play, because it's not the greatest quarterback class, theoretically, Andrew, especially when you compare it to last year's class, where I think we all felt there was a really strong group that was going to play right away. So this grouping here, a little bit different. So I want to start here with you, and I want to find out, tell me, who is a guy that you thought from their performance at the combine that their stock is now rising a little bit from what you saw?
Yeah, I think that for me, Desmond Ridder, quarterback from Cincinnati, I think that his stock definitely rose, not even from like an NFL perspective, but from a fantasy perspective. The talk amongst the super flex rankings and drafters is, Malik Willis is kind of in his own tier, which I agree with. I think that he should be the number one quarterback drafted in super flex formats because of the rushing he offers. But I mean, don't sleep on Desmond Ridder as a guy that can offer a lot of value with his legs. 4.52 40-yard dash, 36 in the vertical, 127-inch broad jump, all above the 92nd percentile in terms of quarterback metrics. So this is a guy that can move. His rushing yards per game in college, 58. That was more than Justin Fields. And what did Justin Fields do when he was a top 12 quarterback last year? Is he ran. Like, that's what he did. So I do think that Desmond Ridder is someone that you can probably get at a value in terms of some of these super flex, because I think that he has not established himself in ahead of some of these more pocket passers like the Kenny Pickett's, who will probably get more draft capital than he will, but he may end up being on a better team. Like, maybe he is not, drafted as the starter, but hey, if he goes to a team with a fringy starting quarterback, someone gets hurt, he can step in. Maybe it's a better situation and he can make plays with his legs. So I just think that Desmond Ridder deserves a little bit more love, and I think that he was solid in the combine.
Well, for those of you who may or may not know, we host a college football show over on the Betting Pro side of things. And Scott Bogman and I had many a conversation in September, October, and November about Desmond Ridder and what we thought in terms of his college to NFL prospects. And I think the one other thing that's underrated about him is the leadership capabilities. He was really instrumental in leading that Cincinnati team. You ask all the teammates, you see the way the teammates support him when he's running his 40. I think all that intangible really matters. And obviously, in terms of quarterback skill, he's got good poise in the pocket. He can make some good decisions out there. I think if you drop in the right scenario, he could be successful. But Derek Brown, what are your thoughts on Desmond Ridder or any other quarterback you thought that perhaps really ticked their stock up a little bit after the combine?
So Desmond Ridder is the name on my list here too. And honestly, I mean, a lot of the same points that Andrew made. But the other thing about it is his EDP currently, he's clustered in there with Matt Corral and Sam Howell, who are kind of scraping the back end of the first round. And if you wanted Ridder to kind of show that he maybe belongs in the late first conversation, or maybe he can get himself to that, this is exactly what the type of showing he needed to do so. I mean, all the athletic measurables, he checked all those different boxes, but also in the throwing drills, coming off of a Senior Bowl where he was erratic. Like, there was nothing, there's not a lot of good things I could say watching Ridder up close and personal firsthand at Senior Bowl. And I felt like he had a very up and down week. So you're looking at coming off an up and down week of Senior Bowl, and in the throwing drills of the combine, he looked really good. He was smooth in the short and intermediate areas of the field. I thought, opposed to one of the quarterbacks I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, looked good also when he went deep. So especially if we're talking about wide receivers he doesn't have a rapport with, they got maybe 2 seconds to work on routes, rapport, combinations, things like that. I thought it was a very good showing for Desmond Ridder. And I'll sneak one other name in here real fast. Cole Kelley, coming out of Southeastern Louisiana. Probably not going to be drafted high, but a guy who's got the size. I want to say he's 6'7", obviously checks a lot of boxes from an arm strength and intangible standpoint. Put up really, really good numbers at Southeastern Louisiana. Again, I don't think he's going to be drafted high at all. But for a guy at the combine, you want to see players that if they're coming from small schools and they put up really good numbers, that they show out in these drills. And I think Kelley, at least, he put himself on the radar to be a late draft pick or maybe a high-end UDFA. But obviously, I think he at least made enough noise where he can make a roster.
All right, when you're looking at Desmond Ridder taking himself up, you mentioned another quarterback there who potentially hurt themselves in the combine from what you saw out of their skills.
I was not high on, Sam Howell walking into the combine, and I really don't think that Sam Howell did a lot to really change that perception. Again, hearkening back to Senior Bowl and where Sam Howell is currently, there's been some talk about him going in the first round, whether you're reading a lot of different mocks. I think that it's possible he falls into the second round. And looking at Howell in the combine, if you watch the entire combine, his throwing drills, I mean, he was a little bit, I'm not going to say like all over the place and get hyperbolic about this, but he didn't look great. You had one time where the wide receiver dropped one of his deep throws, and after that, I mean, he sailed a short out route. Then the next 2 deep throws went out of bounds before he finally got back into rhythm. And if we marry this with his Senior Bowl performance and we try to put all this together, I know walking out of Senior Bowl, his interviews weren't great. If you read between the lines or listen to scouts down there, I think he interviewed a little bit better at the combine. But if you marry all this together, it's pushing Sam Howell possibly into more of that second round conversation. And maybe he doesn't get back into the first round draft capital.
Andrew, how about for you as our quarterback? Do you think potentially hurt their draft stock after what you saw at the combine?
Well, I just think in general, just the quarterback class, I still don't think that somebody has. I still think the general sentiment about the class just being not super great is still true because, who is the buzziest quarterback out of, Indianapolis? Friggin' Mitchell Trubisky. That's who's getting a ton of buzz about quarterback. And that just kind of tells you, what the class is about. Like, people are talking about, Trubisky, he's going to land on the Giants. Like, what's the deal with him when, Sam Howell's out there throwing? Like, it's just something to keep in mind that, even the best quarterback, in my opinion, is Malik Willis. Even he, has a lot of issues. And the quarterback, I guess I will kind of point to just by, default. I don't think that there really was a quarterback that totally stood out. Oh, he just totally tanked his draft stock. But I think it's just worth, Kenny Pickett in his 8.5-inch hands. Like, the only other quarterback that had that small of hands was Michael Vick. And unfortunately, Kenny Pickett does not offer the same type of mobility that Michael Vick once did. So that is a problem for him. And the thing with Kenny Pickett is he holds on to the ball for a really long time. Like, that was his biggest problem. He actually has the longest time to throw in the draft class behind only Malik Willis, but it's a little bit different because Malik Willis is usually running around. He's trying to buy time with his legs. Kenny Pickett is just holding on to the ball because he's not going through his progressions as fast as we'd like to see. So you combine that with potentially problems with turnovers. With small hands, he's going to hold onto the ball for too long. He's going to get knocked out. I just think that I don't think that Pickett's necessarily, a winner, but so by default, he's not someone that I don't think it was a stock up for him necessarily.
I would say that holding onto the ball more of a factor for me than the smaller hands thing. I know some organizations think that it's a very valuable thing, but Michael Vick could sling a football. I mean, I've seen Michael Vick throw footballs out of stadiums, and I've seen him throw 60 yards with his left hand or his right hand. I mean, he was a freak of nature athletically. So, I mean, Joe Burrow had the smaller hands. We heard that noise. Obviously, Joe Burrow handled it in a very Joe Burrow way last year when he said, I guess I should retire. My hands are only 9 inches. So what can I do? I can't possibly be successful. And of course, he was in the Super Bowl this year. So we all know how that went. All right. So we have Ritter, Malik Willis, guys whose stock kind of went up. Sam Howell, Kenny Pickett, according to the guys, stock kind of went down. But once again, not a very thrilling quarterback class. So maybe not too much to talk about. But there might be a lot more to talk about at the running back position. So Derek, let's start with you on this one here. What were the running backs that impressed you in the combine that you thought really did a nice job of kind of elevating their stock heading into the weeks ahead of the draft?
So 2 names make the top of the list for me. And one of these I'm going to defer to Andrew, and we're going to walk hand in hand with our small hands talking about Breece Hall, okay? Breece Hall was fantastic at the combine. But again, I'm going to leave this to Erickson to slam dunk this one. But the guy that I really, really want to get in here is Rachaad White. He tested fantastically. 4.48 40, 84th percentile speed score, and 87th percentile burst score. And out of a guy that's 6 foot tall, this is exactly what you wanted to see at the combine. For a player that we've talked about in a lot of the Rachaad White talk in fantasy circles has been, his receiving upside and what he can do in that part of the game. 11.2% slot rate in 2021, 6th in yards per route run against all running backs with 20 or more targets. To see that married and that type of 3-down skill set married with this type of athleticism, which I thought he ran faster than I projected. I put Rachaad White somewhere in the mid 4.5s. So to see him come and test well at that size, for other guys that honestly face planted in some of these athletic measurables was fantastic. And we should be salivating for Rachaad White and his upside in fantasy.
All right. So stock up for White. Breece Hall, I'm going to alley-oop you, Andrew Erickson, and see if you could do the slam dunk. I was very impressed with Breece Hall catching the football. That was the thing that stood out to me. Outstanding technique. He looked really good in that part of the game. I expected him to be fast, but what was your big takeaway from Breece Hall in terms of what you saw in the combine?
Yeah, I mean, when you catch over 80 passes at the college level, it turns out that it does actually translate when you do, the catching drills at the NFL scouting combine. So again, it does matter to an extent when guys catch the ball at the college level. So Breece Hall, again, just absolutely the testing drills lit them ablaze. 4.39 40-yard dash, 93rd percentile. 40-inch vertical jump, 94th percentile. 126-inch broad jump, 92nd percentile. I mean, the guy honestly did more than I thought he was going to do. Like when I watched Breece Hall, I thought that there was potential that, oh man, like maybe this guy's more of a 4-5 guy. Maybe he has a little bit more David Montgomery to his game. Is it the Iowa State jersey that's tricking me? Am I being fooled? And then, oh, thank God, of course, he just goes out and lights it up. And I'm like, all right, perfect. Like he's just David Montgomery, but like more explosive. Like awesome. This is exactly what we want from a bell cow running back at the NFL level as a rookie, especially. So for me, it's like, the one-on-one in dynasty rookie drafts is Breece Hall. I know that there have been a lot of talk about receivers. Oh, you have the longevity of the receiver, but I'm like, this is when you want the rookie running backs. This is when they are at their best. Is when they are in their first contract on their first team, and Breece Hall is going to go to a team and going to be a bell cow. Like that's what his profile has that written all over him. So I'm very excited about Breece Hall, not only in dynasty but in redraft as well.
I agree with everything you said there, and he's got the game film to match it up to. Watching him play this year, you saw all that. Like you said, a more explosive version of David Montgomery, kind of those shades. But there was another guy actually you had on your list that actually really popped for me too. So I want to talk about Pierre Strong because you want to talk about explosive. He looked explosive running that 40. He looked explosive in the drills. To me, that was the eye-popping guy that stood out that immediately watching, I started making notes on Pierre Strong. That was a dude that stuck out. What stuck out to you, Andrew, about him?
Yeah, I mean, he's a bit of a smaller. Smaller. I mean, he's still pretty big though. 5'11", 207 pounds. Ran a 4.37, which is the 95th percentile. Was actually tied Isaiah Pacheco for the fastest running back time at the NFL Scouting Combine.
And Pacheco was actually surprisingly explosive and good.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe because I live in New Jersey, I never think too much of the Rutgers guys. But then you get him out there in the combine too, and away from his own offense, and you go, wow, Pacheco's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to grab some headlines when you run the fastest 40-yard dash time, but Strong had been someone that, even though he went to a small school, this is what you need to do as a small school candidate, as a draft candidate. Like, you need to show out in the combine drills. You need to be dominant at your level. You need to check off all the boxes because you're the biggest knock on you. Oh, well, you didn't play anybody good. But, the thing about Pierre Strong that kind of stood out to me, and it's kind of what helped me identify guys like Elijah Mitchell and Ramondre Stevenson last year, one statistic was yards per play. Just basically when they're on the field, how many yards are they creating, whether it's through the rushing or receiving. 3.3 yards per play, ranked second in this draft class. And it's a really good indicator of future success as seen by guys like Elijah Mitchell and Ramondre Stevenson, both day 3 picks that ended up carving out roles at the NFL level. So Pierre Strong kind of looks like that potential guy. Again, I don't think that he's necessarily going to be a day 2 guy, but he showed the explosiveness. He can win through multiple ways, graded really high with PFF. So I think that Pierre Strong had a strong outing here at the Combine.
You're not allowed to make the dad jokes. That's Derek in my lane. Stay out of our lane, Erickson. That's all we got left. All right. Let's go to the guys we're stock down here. Let's actually bounce back to you here for a second, Derek. Tell me about the guys that you thought really didn't do enough to elevate themselves from what you saw in their performances this past week.
2 guys that make the list of stock down for me, and that really, there were guys that was high on coming into the Combine, but Sincere McCormick and Tyler Allgeier definitely checked the boxes here and struggled in the Combine. With Sincere McCormick, I mean, the fact that he's 5'9", 205, I was hoping that we saw 3-down skill set out of Sincere and the burst, the speed, these different types of things. For a guy that averaged 1,473 rushing yards over the last 2 years, him running a 4.6 40 and then coming in with a 32%, 32nd percentile speed score and 31st percentile burst score, it's not exactly what you wanted to see, especially for a guy that was coming out of a smaller school. And honestly, the same thing for Allgeier. 4.6 40, and then he comes in with a 37 percentile burst score. That's not something I saw for Tyler Allgeier as a guy that there were a lot of people talking about his speed coming into the Combine. And for a guy that was 10th in yards after contact per attempt, he really underperformed. And I don't think he did. Like, it's not necessarily a coffin nail, Joe, but is he going to boost his 80.4 current EDP? I don't see that happening either. Like, he's probably still going to be a 3rd. Maybe he drops to the 4th round now, considering these testing numbers.
I think it could drop to the fourth from what I saw, to be honest with you, especially the way the NFL is devaluing the running back position overall. I think that's a distinct possibility. Andrew Erickson, who are you devaluing yourself after this week's combine at the running back?
Yeah, my two names are Kyren Williams and Jerome Ford. So Kyren Williams was probably, I mean, things were looking grim when he weighed in, at 5'9", 194 pounds. So we were expecting him to hopefully be around like 200 pounds. He was lighter than that, and that's just not necessarily a good showing when you're going to get weighed in, and people are going to be like, well, you're under 200 pounds, like this is an underweight back, and then you run a 4.65 40-yard dash, 33rd percentile. Like if you're going to be that small, then you need to be fast. Like that's the makeup, and that's kind of like the payoff that you need to have. But he wasn't fast either, and it was really a poor showing. And it's really sad because you look at the running backs that kind of fit that category, and two of them are on the Miami Dolphins: Myles Gaskin, Salvin Ahmed. Devin Singletary is like another name that kind of fits, in terms of the archetype based on Kyren Williams' size and weight. So I don't think that you can totally get rid of Kyren Williams from the discussion in terms of the rookie running backs, because he still has a really strong receiving profile, and that's not necessarily something, again, outside the gauntlet drill. There isn't necessarily a test, that's measuring, like how good of a receiver is he? Now, I think that he was fine in the receiving drills, but I mean, he was routinely being mocked in day two. Guy potentially second round pick, third round pick, and I just think that there's no way that happens anymore. I think that he's going to be a day 3 pick. And that's unfortunately going to hurt him a lot, because there's going to be a lot of day 3 picks from this running back class. And it's just unfortunate for Kyren Williams, because I thought that we could see a lot more from him, but we just didn't get that. Jerome Ford is the other guy, the Cincinnati Bearcats running back. So his 4.46 is a good 40-yard dash time, like in most draft classes, but in this draft class, it really wasn't as good. It's just depending on how fast the class was. I mean, it's still 86th percentile. So the thing that's scary, though, about Ford is the lack of explosiveness in the jumping drills. So he's a little bit of a smaller back, but, his 31 vert, his 118 broad jump, 14th percentile in the vert, 54th percentile in the broad jump, kind of create some question marks about, okay, is this just kind of like a guy? Like he transferred from Alabama so that he could find an easier way to get to his starting job, kind of. Trey Sermon kind of did something similar to that last year, and we found that when guys transfer and move from schools and just always kind of have trouble earning the bell cow role, that's something that they don't end up getting better at the NFL level. Like if he's in a backfield with a bunch of other guys, I'm not sure there's enough about his profile or that's going to make him stand out. Like, okay, if he falls into a 3-down role because, XYZ all get hurt, okay, then maybe Jerome Ford can be someone that you can use. But I don't necessarily think that he showed that he's a difference maker in any way, shape, or form from the combine.
I think Ford is that prototypical example of the guy who his stock gets a little elevated because the success of the team itself. And then we start to separate him away from the success of the team, and you start to analyze just the player, it starts to fall off a little bit. And I think that's one of those things that happens quite a bit in college football, and it happens in this process. And that's why the combine is important. When you separate these things out and you start to just hyper focus on the talent of the player, you start to see some of the things that maybe Alabama saw, or some other schools where you see a guy who they like the talent, but he doesn't quite show up and show out. And then eventually he ends up transferring, moving to another school. So good stuff there on those guys. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. What it's all about is the wide receiver class. This was a fun group. I got to tell you, you want to talk about speed and a fast class here, just overall. I mean, this was the most entertaining 40-yard dashes I've seen over a few day span ever in the history of the combine. This was a very fun group in the wide receivers as well. Andrew, let's start with you here. Give me a few of the names that, now that you've had some time to think about it and digest it a little bit, that you really think did a good job of improving their draft stock heading into the draft.
All right, so number one, we'll start with Skyy Moore. First of all, just great name. Like this is just a name I can get behind. Going to the sky, going to the moon.
Well, he was the guy
Moore.
We talked about. Remember on the preview show, that was what Scott Bogman brought. Our boy, our Dynasty podcast host Bogman, who we will bring him back kind of theoretically later in the show because there's a piece of that. But Skyy Moore was one of those names he dropped on us too, and I agree with you. To me, he was very smooth out there in all the drills.
Yeah, 83rd percentile, 40-yard dash time, 78th percentile broad jump, 44th percentile in the vertical jump. I mean, I think that his athletic numbers were better than the expectations, and that's really what the combine is about, is were you exceeding, reaching, or failing to meet expectations? Like, that's really what the combine is about. And in Skyy Moore's case, I thought that he exceeded the expectation. We weren't really sure how athletically gifted he was. We know that he was a mega producer at the college level, 3.4 yards per route run, 99th percentile in terms of the draft eligible wide receivers over the past 3 seasons. And I mean, the dude has massive freaking hands. You know what they say about guys with big hands, Joe? Big gloves.
Big gloves, huge gloves. And by the way, that whole report card thing you just kind of dropped through, Debro, do you have a little like hives or something from 6th grade? The way he was talking about meeting or exceeding expectations or falling below, it felt a little awkward there for a moment. But look, you're right. Skyy definitely to me was the standout. That was definitely the guy to me. Anybody else, Erickson, for you that stood out in this wide receiver class as well?
Christian Watson from North Dakota State. Now, he was someone that had gotten a lot of hype at the Senior Bowl. I know that he impressed a lot of the coaches and staff there. And I mean, he just continued to be on this ascend, through the training and through the combine testing drills. 4.36 40-yard dash time. And I mean, for a receiver at 6'4" and 211 pounds to run a 4.36 is just ridiculous, especially when you combine that with his jumps, especially the broad jump, 136 inches, 98th percentile. This guy just is looking like a screaming explosive monster, like out on the field. And again, yeah, he went to a small school, but everything else, he's checking off all the boxes. And if he had gone to, a Power 5 school, he would be like a top 20 pick, like no doubt. Like he would, if he had brought all these measurables in as a guy from Alabama, as a guy from Clemson, like one of these big schools, Christian Watson would be talked about alongside the Drake Londons, the Treylon Burks, like these types of players. And honestly, I mean, I think that he's done enough to earn round 1 draft capital.
All right, before we move on to Derek's list, anybody else, Andrew, that stood out to you?
Tyquan Thornton. I mean, look, I'll be honest. Like, I literally had no idea who this guy was until this guy ran. Until this guy ran. At first we thought he broke John Ross's record. I'm like, oh my god, like how did I miss this guy?
Close.
But
close.
He came up just short. At 4.28. Oh my god, what a loser! Friggin' slow guy. But I mean, he's gonna be drafted now, probably on day 2. I think that you could see him going similar to where Anthony Schwartz went last year from Auburn, a guy that was just an absolute burner. So. Again, I mean, his college production profile is not necessarily super impressive, but someone's going to take a shot at him because he's got wheels. And, 40-yard dash times definitely get guys drafted, even if they are kind of off the radar. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, I think that they just kind of cemented themselves both as like at least top 24 picks, probably top 20. I know that, Olave looked like he was going to, have this amazing 40-yard dash time. But then when they readjusted the times, it was actually Garrett Wilson that ran faster. And that kind of was surprising to me. I have Garrett Wilson as my wide receiver 1 in my rookie rankings. And I mean, I was like, perfect. Like he did exactly what I wanted to do. I think he actually ran a little bit faster than I thought he was going to. I thought he'd be more in the 4.4s, but running a 4.38, I was pleasantly surprised. And I was like, boom, wide receiver 1, he's staying there.
It's interesting that you have Wilson above Olave because I feel like Olave gets a lot more press. So that's really interesting for those of you who have those rookie drafts coming up. If he should slip past Olave considerably, Wilson, man, that's a great potential pickup there as Andrew has him up higher even going in. All right, Derek, let's switch gears over to your guys that really showed out for you and showed up at the combine at wide receiver.
Obviously, I'm going to piggyback on Erickson's take on Christian Watson. Definitely a guy that crushed, I think, everything, added to the Senior Bowl week. I'm not as high as Erickson thinking he's going to be a first-round pick, but I think he will not leave the second round in the NFL draft. That is for sure. So, like him, especially, just building on what he already showed at the Senior Bowl. But 2 other guys, I want to go with the big guys here. 2 other wide receivers that are measuring in 6'3", with George Pickens and Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce crushed the combine, 4.4 40, as well as he was the top in the vert, and his 3-cone time was the same as Skyy Moore. So you're talking about a guy that's 6'3", 211, and he has this type of speed, this type of agility. I think that he definitely helped himself in the combine, as well as George Pickens coming off the ACL. And with you marry this with the production profiles like we're talking about, a guy that had a 96 percentile breakout age, 86 percentile yards per reception, and he's 6'3" and he's running a 4.4. I think that is he definitely never necessarily going to improve his 42 EDP right now? No, but as a guy that you were looking for him to do these things at the combine to cement himself into that second round, definitely not going to leave like the top of the 3rd. he definitely checked the boxes that he need to, especially coming off the injury.
I'm so glad you brought up Pickens, because to me that was a very important combine more than anything, because Pickens is a player of extraordinary talent, but because of the game script of those games that Georgia played in, where they just crushed people, they were just running the clock out, running the football all over the place. They weren't really challenged all that much to throw the ball as much as maybe you wanted to see Pickens and get enough film where you could really feel great about him. I think you see the moments, you go, oh, this guy's really special, but man, I wish there was a little bit more of it. You didn't really get challenged until you get to those SEC championship game, and then obviously eventually in the college playoffs, you saw that as well from Pickens. So I'm really glad, and I'm glad you brought him up, because that's a player too that I think is almost flying under the radar a little bit. It's like this great talent on a great team, and almost the inverse of that conversation we had with Ford. It's like, this guy is really good, but the team was so good, he really didn't get to shine as much as he could have, because this team just wasn't challenged all that much. George, I mean, then you watch those defensive guys work out. We'll talk to them later, because my goodness, when you start to see them individually, it's one thing you see them as a group all the time, and then you watch them individually and go, how did anybody stand a chance against that defense? My goodness, they were good. All right, so those are some positive names here. I love those names. Derek, give me the names that were not so positive. Let's flip the coin here and look at some of the guys whose stock maybe took a hit after the combine at the wide receiver spot.
So there's 3 names on the list here. 2 of them are low-hanging fruit with Wan'Dale Robinson and David Bell. With Robinson and Bell, I mean, the times were just underwhelming. I mean, they're tied for the 4th lowest broad jumps. The type of combine that you wanted Rondell to have, Calvin Austin actually had that combine. So it's sad times for Wan'Dale Robinson. Having that type of size, being 5'8", 178, you want him to be super explosive, because that's what he's going to need going to a league where everybody's super explosive. But it didn't happen. It didn't come to fruition for him or David Bell. David Bell's testing numbers were, honestly, we were watching the combine and while we were in Arizona and stuff, and we're like, good Lord, all these numbers are juiced. And then you have David Bell, who's coming in with a 4.65 40, and you're like, oh, he must have missed out on the juice bar. It had not happen for David Bell. So really sad times for David Bell. But one of the guys that got a lot of buzz, and he was getting back into the first round buzz, and I still see him in mocks. And I think he underperformed. And honestly, with him measuring in at 5'11" and coming in light at 178, Jahan Dotson, I think, is going to fall out of that first round conversation, go into the second round, as a guy that all the talk was on him running a 4.3 at the combine. I was like, I don't really see that on film. I think he's a 4.4 guy. And when he opted out of Senior Bowl, a lot of the rumors down there was he might be smaller than these measurements pertain. Like, he might come in a little bit smaller. So when I see 178, I'm like, did he try to gain weight to get to that 178? And considering his size, none of these testing numbers are jumping off the page, fellas. Like 36 percentile speed score, 53rd in burst. I really think, unfortunately, he is going to fall into the second round conversation and out of the first round buzz. And also, if we're looking at, he had a 10-1 broad, which would equal to Velus Jones, Bo Melton, and Braylon Sanders. And none of those guys are getting any of that type of buzz. So honestly, a lot of these things that I was kind of forecasting, or at least building into my perception of Dotson walking into the combine, but really a disappointing combine for Dotson, especially for Dotson stands. If they were like, yes, he gets first round draft capital, let's go. I just don't see it, man. I don't see it after this combine.
I agree. I don't see it necessarily. I see him more like a second round guy anyway. And it's funny because this conversation is one that Andrew and I had on the weekend together, and we were just texting back and forth about him because we disagreed too. I thought Dotson looked tremendous in the pass catching drills. I understand from the measurables, about the speed. I understand that. And also, Andrew is making an argument to me about Dotson regarding, he didn't really have the numbers that he was hoping for Penn State. But I don't know if you could put that on Dotson, because he was constantly playing with backup quarterbacks, injured quarterbacks. The quarterback carousel at Penn State this year was absolutely just atrocious at times. So all of those things considered, let me ask you this. Do you think there's a world where Dotson ends up in the right spot with the right team, maybe later in the draft, but becomes an intriguing value because the skill set's there if maybe the measurables aren't?
I think his skills are good. I mean, he's definitely a separator. I think that is he a guy that I think can be step into an alpha role? I think it's really in a slimmer range of outcomes for him. But do I think that he has the upside and the skill set to be a really strong wide receiver 2 for an NFL franchise? And maybe get into that low wide receiver 2 talk and dynasty high end 3. I think it's possible, but I still think that at least for all the buzz, I think that dynasty and fantasy circles are still going to remain higher on Dotson than possibly the NFL, or at least I'm projecting him moving forward.
All right, fair enough. Andrew Erickson, let's go to the wide receivers that you weren't high on. Maybe you want to take another shot at Dotson here or somebody else. Where the board is yours, Andrew. Where do you want to go?
No, we'll let Dotson. We'll give him a break for today. I'll just, I'll hit on so Wan'Dale again, Wan'Dale Robinson. His listed weight on the Kentucky website was 5'11", 185 pounds. So when he measures in at 5'8" and 178 pounds, you're kind of like, okay, like they missed 3 inches off this guy. And I know he transferred him from Nebraska, but honestly, I'm just kind of terrified because he could be used as like this running back wide receiver hybrid, and just the track record with these guys coming out, at undersized, they just need to find. I mean, Cordero Patterson, it took him 10 years to figure out how to use them the right way. And we're just assuming Wan'Dale Robinson will just, he'll get drafted by a team, they'll use him the right way. I see a lot of Tavon Austin, even a Rondale Moore player, and I think Rondale Moore's profile was better than Wan'Dale Moore Robinson's profile. So I just got some concerns about Wan'Dale, and he's probably someone that I'm not going to be necessarily gravitating towards. In the end of second round rookie drafts, there'll probably be some other receiver, because there's a lot of these receivers are going to get clustered together, and I think Wan'Dale has enough red flags that I think that I'd probably be okay with passing on him for one of these other guys. And then David Bell, again, he was never a burner. That wasn't his game ever at Purdue. So it's not super surprising to see him run super slow. But, I mean, you just want guys that are explosive. I know that, this dovetails nicely into my next player. I know a lot of people are pegging Treylon Burks as N'Keal Harry after he ran a 4.5, when, David Bell is probably more of the N'Keal Harry comp than Treylon Burks is. So that will, bring me into Treylon Burks, who I'm saying stock down, because I don't really think that his stock is down. I'm just saying that the market seems like the stock is down. His value is gone. Treylon Burks, oh my God, he's not DK Metcalf. What's going on? And I think that's the problem here. It was the expectation of Treylon Burks, that people that had him wide receiver 1 in the class, that thought he was going to test like DK Metcalf. They thought, oh my God, this guy's going to be just this insane freak. And what do you know? He's just a regular, 225-pound wide receiver. I say regular with air quotes because that's not regular for anybody. He still is massive compared to the rest of the class. There's not many other big receivers like him in this class. And a 4.55 40-yard dash is still fine. That is more than fine for someone that is his same weight. And, his game is predicated on yards after the catch, which isn't necessarily present in a lot of these testing drills. He's not breaking tackles. Right. He's not running away from defenders. His long speed is better than his build-up speed. It takes him a little bit while to get up to speed because, hey, he weighs 225 freaking pounds. So, yeah, sorry he doesn't run a sub 4.4 like DK Metcalf. He's still clearly a top
there's no more excuses after Jordan Davis now. Now it's not how much you weigh, whatever you run. But I agree with what you're saying, and I think that is certainly the case here. I mean, when you look at a guy like Burks especially, that you're alluding to a very important fact, which is watching the film of a guy or watching a guy in games matters a whole lot. And if a guy's a good football player and he's breaking tackles and he's getting yards after the catch, I mean, Derek, when you look at Treylon, is that a player for you that, coming out of the combine, did his combine change your perception of him at all?
I mean, Joe, look, I was going to sit here and step in and talk about this from the beginning. Treylon Burks, our expectations were ridiculous. We were sitting in Arizona and we're writing up player props, lines for 40s and stuff. And all these Burks lines were 4.3, 4.4. And I'm like, what are we doing here? So to see Treylon Burks testing numbers, no, he's not a guy that I ever pegged for the 4.3s. The fact that he ran a 4.5, okay, fine. We're talking about, did he test as an elite athlete? No. But does that put it is that a coffin nail for him to say okay, he's going to suck? No, I don't think it is. I think the expectations for Treylon Burks jumping out of the frickin' gym were a little bit ridiculous to begin with. And the fact that if he ran a 4.5, that's fine. And I think that like we're talking about with Erickson mentioned this and bringing up like his abilities and his skill set and how he's going to translate to the NFL. He's still going to get first round draft capital. I don't think any of us are going to sit here and talk about, okay, this combine bombed him.
Right.
He's going in the second round now. That's not going to happen, people. So he's still going to get the draft capital. He's still going to get the early opportunity from that. And I think that it's still all wheels up for Treylon Burks. Now, do you peg the ceiling a little bit lower because, okay, he didn't attest like an elite monster? Fine, if you want to go that route. But anybody wanting to trash on Treylon and saying, all right, he's done. It's N'Keal Harry time, baby. Just toss him in the trash can and let's move on. I'm not there. I was never there, and he was not a player that I ever saw 4-3 in his range of outcomes to begin with.
That was one too many N'Keal Harry references. I just want everyone to know I'm keeping track. We have one more to go, I think, that we can even use the rest of the season. So I'd like to stop it here and end it with this show. Please.
Forewarning, if the Patriots draft Treylon Burks,
I'm
not sure I can.
No, it's gonna happen.
I'm not sure I'll be able to handle it because I don't know what's gonna happen. And if that happens, then okay, like anything could happen. All range of outcomes are in play.
But we've seen in the past, there's elite athletes who don't make great football players. And we see some great football players that don't always test like elite athletes. It's nice when they cross over, and more often than not, they typically do. But it's not always the case. And that's the thing to always keep in mind when you're trying to evaluate some of this young talent too. Don't forget what you see on the field, in the pads, in the helmet, in the moment. That matters a whole lot. So don't lose sight of that as well. All right, let's move on to the tight end group. And if you think that the quarterbacks are underwhelming, I've got the tight end group for you. I am just not impressed by this group at all. And we're coming off a year where Kyle Pitts was incredibly impressive and the generational freakish talent, and I'm still buying into that. Freiermuth was a guy that obviously had a great rookie season by all measures there. But this class to me is just not getting it done. But maybe you guys see the board differently. Let's start with you, Derek. Is there a tight end that kind of stood out or improved his standing with you after the combine?
I was not a massive Daniel Bellinger guy walking into the combine, and the way that he tested, honestly, I've got to go back and rewatch the film. I've got to go double check some things on him because the fact that he tested as 78th percentile or higher in speed, burst at 6'5", 253, as a guy that was used in line on 56% of his snaps last year, it was impressive. His testing numbers really jumped off the page for me. And I know we're talking about 4.6 40s and saying jumped off the page, but for a tight end, these are good numbers. And for a guy that, at least going back and getting ready for this show, fellas, 7th in yards after catch per reception amongst tight ends with 20 or more targets. The box score numbers are not there for Bellinger, but I'm curious. I got to go back and watch the film on him because the testing numbers did surprise me, and I'm really curious about what his receiving upside is or could be at the NFL level.
All right, Andrew, how about for you? Is there a tight end that stock is going up for you after the combine?
Yeah, I think I like UCLA's Greg Dulcich. I think that he is someone that I was not really high on, when I was doing my initial rookie tight end rankings. He wasn't someone that really popped off the page, but he's been pretty high in terms of a lot of NFL mock drafts. He's someone that they've talked about. Some people have even had him, I believe Daniel Jeremiah from NFL.com had him as his only tight end in the top 50. So clearly there is the NFL teams seem to like him a lot. And I think that, his outing at the combine, 80th percentile broad jump, 76th percentile 40-yard dash time. I think that he did enough. And I think that he was pretty fluid through the gauntlet drill. Look, we're looking for a tight end that has the profile of like a mismatch type of guy. And, he's 6'4", 243. So he definitely has the size and some of the speed to be faster than a lot of linebackers. And he has a receiving profile. So again, in a tight end class that doesn't really have a lot of pizzazz, I do think that this tight end in particular, Dulcich, I think he does have some of the requisite things that we're looking for when we're looking for the next, pass catching tight end. He's a guy that can make big plays. 18 yards per catch over his 4-year career at UCLA is the third most by any tight end invited to the combine, and that's per Next Gen Stats.
Daniel Jeremiah is much smarter than I am, but I did not see what everybody else is seeing in Dulcich. To me, it did not jump off the screen at all in terms of him catching the football. It was just kind of pedestrian to me at times in the drills. And I understand from the size point of view, I feel like he's this classic, he's what they look like kind of thing. But then when you start to really get them on the field and you stack them up against the NFL talent, I don't think it's going to measure up when it comes there. So again, that's my concern with this whole tight end class. Andrew, was there a guy that really didn't impress you in the tight end class that might be underwhelming to begin with?
Yeah, I got a bone to pick with Cole Turner from Nevada.
Oh,
Yes.
do you?
I got a bone to
Your betting balance says hi.
yes, my betting balance. So the cool thing about that Arizona trip was we all got to partake in some gambling because of the way that things are set up in Arizona. Sports gambling is legal, so we had the chance to place some bets and have some fun. So I was all about Cole Turner's 40-yard dash prop. I was like, oh, I'm pounding the under here. It's like 4.71. I mean, he's gonna beat this. He's a converted wide receiver. Like, how can he not? 4.76. Not ideal for a mismatch.
Now you know why they
nightmare.
converted him to tight end.
Yes, because clearly he's not fast. He's not fast enough, but it wasn't even the 40-yard dash time that was bad. His jumps were not great either. They didn't leap off the page. Sluggish time. I was disappointed. I kind of expected Cole Turner to have more of a Dulcich type of outing. They are similar sizes, so I'm now switching stances. Cole Turner has now tanked in my rankings. I'm now pushing that all over to the Dulcich side, going all in on him as my 6'4" tight end of the 6'4" tight end that I want in this class. I say want as in, yes, maybe I'll invest a third-round rookie draft pick in them. But yeah, I think that Cole Turner, I mean, look, if you want to be that mismatch guy, especially someone that operated in the slot a lot at Nevada, you're expecting him to bring some level of explosiveness where he didn't have that. And, one of the things that made his major red flag was creating yards after the catch. 2.8 yards after the catch per reception, second percentile, awful. And if he doesn't have the speed to get open that way, I just don't necessarily see a lot of upside with Cole Turner.
I'm glad we could have this therapy session for you, Andrew, where you can go ahead and get past your Cole Turner feelings. How about you here, Derek? Who was the stock down at tight end for you after the combine?
All right. I know people don't want to hear this out of my mouth, and I know all the hype has been heavy on Trey McBride. But for a guy that people, I think, were hoping that he took the step forward or was going to take the step forward and just stamp it and be like, I'm the tight end one in this class. It's me. That didn't happen for Trey McBride. And look, he measured in at 6'3", 246. I know we're kind of splitting hairs. Okay, 6'3" versus 6'4", but some of the size stuff, you're like, okay, he needs to test well, and he needs to be not even just like an elite athlete, but an upper echelon athlete, and to win at the NFL level. And for a guy that had the sixth lowest vertical jump, I mean, he was immediately above Connor Hayward, who was testing with tight ends, but that dude's a fullback. It's not great, people. A 48th percentile burst score, and again, I'm going to go back to the size, and you're looking at the top 12 tight ends in fantasy points per game, people. Last year, 75% of these guys were 6'5" or above, and 66% of them were tipping the scales at 250 or above. And it's not to say that like Trey McBride can't be a solid pro, can't have a solid career. But we're looking at the size, we're looking at the testing and stuff like that. People need to pump the brakes on all the Trey McBride hype right now, whether it's, I've heard people talk about it in dynasty circles and being like, all right, maybe first round back end of dynasty rookie drafts. And I'm like, there's no way. And looking at these combine testing numbers, as well as marrying everything else together, we just need to understand and put the guy in the proper box as far as what our expectations are and the range of outcomes for his career. I think he could still be good, but is he going to just be like smash and grab and just fantastic from the word go? I don't know if I see that.
I don't see it either, and I'm glad that you brought it up today. Now, next year's tight end class could be very exciting. There's a couple prospects in there. If you watch college football this year, you saw them pop, and I'll tell you that's a class we're going to talk about very differently, I think, than this one. But I think tight end and quarterback, a little underwhelming. But what wasn't underwhelming is the defensive guys. And, I've got a soft spot for all those IDP guys as the host of the IDP show here at Fantasy Pros in season, where we do our ranks every week, Scott Bogman and I. But before we get to defensive guys, I just want to make a public apology to our own pal, Scott Bogman here, because, well, I kind of fought with him last time we were on the show about how I thought Evan Neal was just a lock. It's going to be Evan Neal at the top. It's going to be Evan Neal, blah, blah, blah. And then I watched Ike Ekwonu. He was impressive. That was a very impressive combine for Ike Ekwonu. And I think that maybe, just maybe, he is in that number one overall conversation. So if you're wagering that, it's a little bit more appealing because he's a little higher up there on the trough in terms of odds. I think it might be a little bit more possible than it was a week ago. So public apology. I'm sorry, Bogman. I dismissed you earlier. So shout out to you on that one. Let's talk about some of these defensive guys. Look, clearly the Georgia lineman stood out. I mean, Trayvon Walker was spectacular. Jordan Davis, we all know, has become the darling of combines forever now between the 40 time, the long jump record. I mean, this guy, and such a personable, likable kid too. Devontae Wyatt also was tremendous. I mean, these three guys alone, and I think at a position two in those defensive drafts and those IDP drafts, defensive line is always hard to come by, right? I think every year, we're in these drafts, especially just for redraft IDP, where it's like, well, it's Aaron Donald and a couple other guys, and after that's the drop off. And we always say hit D-line first because the drop off is significant. But we got some good guys there. I think Fedarian Mathis was tremendous in the combine. My goodness, the footwork was there, the size, the agility, everything you could want. There was a guy, too, from a smaller school from Western Kentucky University, from Conference USA. Their Defensive Player of the Year in 2021 was D'Angelo Malone. And Malone, to me, all the size, all the measurables, smaller school, not as much press. But when you start to look at what he did, he had 88 tackles, right? 16 and a half tackles for a loss. He had 8 sacks. And if you play him in a 3-4 system as an outside linebacker, I think he could be very good. So for me, D'Angelo Malone was a guy that really stood out to me that I think if he ends up in the right system, this could be a guy in IDP leagues to take a certain draft stock and draft capital in. Travis Jones, defensive lineman too, from UConn, another big guy who moved very well. And the problem is all the Georgia guys got all the love, but there were some other guys too. From the cornerback class too, Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati, tremendous talent there, long reach. I think he's going to be a very good corner in the NFL. A little smaller in terms of size, but again, a guy that maybe can put on some weight as it goes. And then Nick Cross from Maryland, too, at safety. That's another guy I thought was very good. And Christian Harris, I thought did a good job, too, at linebacker, kind of building back his stock. Everybody's been talking about Nakobe Dean, as they should. But I think Christian Harris had a really good combine, too. And I think going into last year, he was kind of the 1-1 linebacker. And I think everyone's talking about a few other guys, too. But I think Harris kind of reasserted his stock here after the combine. Just curious, any winners for you guys? Derek, for you from the defensive side of the football?
I'm going to go with the guy with the hot, nasty, sexy, beautiful speed. And that's Tariq Woolen, man. Like 6'4", 205. He ran a 4.2 640. Woo-hoo-hoo. Our guy over on Twitter at MathBomb it comes out with all these relative athletic scores. He measured in at a 10. Whew. I mean, that's fantastic, man, especially if we're talking about corners and we're talking about the speed and a guy that honestly – coming out of UTSA, he was recruited as a wide receiver. And if teams are drafting based off of traits, upside, athleticism, especially at the cornerback position, he's got the size. We know that. And the athleticism he's still coming into his own as a corner and a small school prospect, 81 passer rating allowed in coverage last year. I think that a team we could be surprised with how high he goes in the NFL draft, considering he blazed the combine.
All right, Andrew, for you, from the defensive side of the football, anybody stand out to you that really improved their draft stock?
Just want to wax more poetic about Jordan Davis from Georgia.
Wax away. He's a good story, man.
341 pounds, 4.78. So that's the best weight-adjusted time among 487 interior defenders to run at the combine, per Kevin Cole from PFF. So he had a 130.64 speed score, which is basically the 100th percentile. DK Metcalf's speed score was 133.3, and he was running a 40-yard dash at 6'3" and 228 pounds. So I mean, it's basically a defensive tackle with like DK Metcalf type ability, for moving skills, and it's pretty crazy. But one thing I do want to note, and this is me flexing my IDP muscles, I do think that Jordan Davis has a chance potentially to like be a little bit overdrafted in terms of where you take him in fantasy.
Well, he's not going to play every down. You look at guys like Walker and Wyatt, those two guys have a much better path to being on the field more, hence more tackles, more productivity. And I think that's the thing. We're all going to fall in love with Davis in the combine, and the kid is amazing and the story is amazing. And he could be a difference maker in the NFL, but that's a little different story in terms of fantasy.
Yeah. When you test like the Incredible Hulk, you got to know that his stock is going up, fellas. Yeah. Like, good Lord.
It is. And it should. But I think we have to just have
But
a
it's
very
like,
tiny
but is it
grain of
really
salt with
going
it, that's all.
for the right? Again, it's now you're projecting. You're like, okay, like this guy, he was a run
And can he
stuffing
stay at
defensive.
340,
Yeah,
Andrew?
this
This guy
guy
was a
was
360 something, and now he's down to 340 for the combine. Is that weight going to stay off? That's always a big question with some of these young guys too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was a run stuffing guy. I mean, that's why I didn't have him. You know, I did my first mock draft. I was like, I'm not putting Jordan Davis because he's a run stuffing defensive tackle, and those are just not as valued highly. Now, he's definitely going in the first round. Like, he's going in my second mock for sure. I feel like an idiot for not including him in the first one, but I was trying to think, you know, the NFL is somewhat forward thinking. You know, we've gotten away from running backs in the first round for the most part, and now we're trying to get away from defensive tackles. I know last year Christian Barmore was the guy that a lot of people mocked in the first round. He ended up going in the second round because teams are figuring out, like, we don't care about stopping the run. Like, it's really not that important for us to try and stop the run. Now, obviously, Davis, you know, after this combine performance, like, he's going to go in the first round along with basically everyone else from Georgia. But the thing is important to note is he was a run stuffing guy, and everything from a pass rush perspective is projection. Now, it looks great on paper because, oh my God, this guy is super explosive. You know, he's going to be able to run over, you know, offensive linemen. Okay, well, we'll find out. Like, when he's running on air, yeah, he's really, really fast. But, you know, does he still have that power, you know, in between the tackles to actually rush the passer and not just be a run stuffing defensive tackle? Again, if he's going to be playing more snaps at the NFL level, I'm just saying, when he's only playing 25 snaps per game and the offense is playing every other top first like pick from Georgia's defense, and he comes in, pretty sure that offense is going to be pretty beat up as it is. So that's just something to keep in mind with Jordan Davis. I still think that I would probably, like you had alluded to, you want to draft Walker, you want to draft Deontay Wyatt ahead of Jordan Davis in your IDP leagues.
All right, let's get to some of the losers here. I know this might sound weird, but I thought Devin Lloyd was a bit of a loser here, only because he had the combine to himself. Like, I feel like all the attention could be on him, and he could really wow, and he just didn't for me in some of the drills and the 40 time as well. I mean, Nakobe Dean didn't partake. He actually came out better because he didn't partake, whereas Devin Lloyd actually took a little hit, and Christian Harris went up a little bit. Majai Sanders, edge rusher from Cincinnati, is another player too. He had dropped 30 pounds. To me, he was too slender. I don't know what you guys thought about him, but he was just too slender for me. I don't think that's an NFL body type right now. I know they were saying he was sick before, but look, you don't lose that much weight being sick a couple days before the combine. He was too slight, and I just don't think that body type's going to play. And the biggest one for me is Kayvon Thibodeau, the edge rusher from Oregon that everybody loves and everybody's enthralled with the talent. And having watched him this season, there were games where he looked spectacular and games where you couldn't find him on the field. And then there were games where kind of his hot head sometimes got away from him, bad penalties, bad moments, and things like that. He told everybody before the combine he was going to run the 40 and run all the drills and show everybody and blah, blah, blah. He ran the 40 times weren't exactly, I think, what he hoped for. And then he packed up his duffel bag and didn't run anything else. And I understand his thought process, or so he was basically letting the media know, that, well, I didn't want to run everything and do all the drills because they were separating them out over a long period of time. And I didn't think that was very good for me. I want to show that I could play linebacker, I could play in the line, I could play everywhere. To me, that's a bunch of nonsense. Yeah, you can go do it at your pro day, but if you're going to tell everybody you're going to go out and do your thing, and there's already questions about the makeup of the kid, and then you don't do those things when things don't go your way, and you could see also on the sidelines just kind of the sourpuss on his face. I'm telling you, the body language was bad. I think Thibodeau was a very risky pick. Derek, to me, this is a guy that a classic guy of enormous talent, but I think some questionable makeup and some questions there that I think an NFL team is going to be too enthralled with the talent. Take him. He's got a great name. Everybody loves some of the highlight reels, but I think there's some underlying issues there. To me, I don't want any part of him in fantasy leagues. And if it was my team, to me, first round capital, man, I think that's a big risk. But what do you think of Thibodeau's performance or lack of? And then maybe anybody else on the defensive side of the football that for you really kind of the stock went down, Derek?
I think I'm echoing basically the two names you just discussed. I think Lloyd, you wanted to see him kind of smash and grab and kind of like separate himself, but we just didn't see that. But also with Thibodeau, I mean, I think that somebody is still they're going to draft him based off of upside, based off of traits, and that's fine. But still, I think it's going to be more of a dice roll than you're really looking at. Like, he's the guy that if you're going to draft him as high as we're projecting he's going to go, maybe he falls down the board and he's one of the big like surprises out of the NFL draft. I don't think it's going to happen because I think a team is still going to take it and swing for the fences, but that's what he is. I mean, basically, he is probably a home run or he's a bunt single. He's probably not like a
the
safe
problem
double.
I have, Derek, the problem I have is this. He's the kind of guy that can win you football games, but also lose you football games. I don't want guys on my team that can lose you football games for bad reasons. And I think that, whether it be effort level or whether it be stupid mistakes or things that get away from him, to me, that's a huge red flag.
And that's really like, he is the risk that a GM or a team's going to have to absorb. Like, he could be the differentiation between like us looking back 2-3 years from now and looking at whoever selects him and that draft class and being like, that was a smash, it was a home run, or looking at that team's draft class and being like, ugh, it started ugly at the top and it's just a bad draft class. Like, he could be the difference maker in a draft class for a team and saying, okay, they really crushed this draft, or they sucked at the end of the day.
All right, who sucked at the end of the day defensively for you, Andrew Erickson, from the Combine?
I guess the only guy that I thought maybe I expect a little bit more, especially in the 40-yard dash, was Kyle Hamilton. Not extremely fast, straight line speed. Now, I mean, he's a big safety. Like, he's not your average safety, and he did really well in the jumping drills. But again, we're kind of nitpicking here where, I mean, this is a top 3, top 5 pick. I've seen him mock that high, but, a lot of the rhetoric after the Combine has been all these guys, all these other players are being talked up of going up boards. Trevon Walker from Georgia, Trevor Penning from the tackle. I think that they're like, Kyle Hamilton's like, are people looking for excuses? Well, he's a safety. Like, we should draft that position more, that makes a bigger difference for our team, as opposed. I mean, I had him mocked as 3 overall to the Houston Texans, and now I'm like, what's going to stop them from taking a tackle instead? Why wouldn't they take Iggy instead of a safety? Kyle Hamilton now. So I don't think that. I mean, obviously, I think he's still like the clear-cut number 1 safety in this class. I still think he's a top 10 pick, but maybe he didn't necessarily lock in, I'm a top 3 guy.
I want to remind everybody we have our first mock draft episode of the 2022 year coming up later this week. So make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Fantasy Pros and click that notifications bell. You can watch every podcast. We're going to have a live stream of the draft this year again, too. We got a lot of fun things going on. And when you're a subscriber, you can go ahead and try to win a Cam Akers helmet thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction. So if you go to fantasypros.com/contest and you're a subscriber, you just screenshot that bad boy, go over to fantasypros.com/contest, fill out the form, and just like that Cam Akers autographed helmet can be yours. And of course, the conversations never end on our Discord channel at fantasypros.com/chat, where you can get in the conversations with these two lovely human beings and ask them all kinds of football questions and give me a break for a change. Ask these guys some questions. They're the newbies. Pick their brain. They're very refreshed after that hot tub that they were hanging out in Arizona for the last week, watching combines and making notes and losing money on 40
John
times.
is still in the hot tub. I swear to God, he's still in the hot
John
tub.
might still be in the hot tub. And Chris, nobody has seen Chris for the last week and a half. Nobody knows what's become of him potentially. No, I can't. He'll probably be editing the show and possibly editing that out of it. Once again, great stuff from you guys as always. This is great conversations, and I cannot wait as we continue to talk more NFL draft and these prospects, because it's always an exciting time when the league turns over and free agency right around the corner as well. Lots of exciting times. Football never sleeps, and neither does Fantasy Pros. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Derek Brown and Andrew Erickson, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.